All right, we're rocking and rolling. So today is December 27th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and this is our December community call, which will, moving forward, be called our monthly live fireside, because I think there's something about gathering around a fire that has a really powerful, some symbolism to it. So thanks everyone for being here. If you're here in person, thanks for your energy today and your attention. And if you're listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of our community. And our goal with these monthly calls is to provide an outlet for our community to connect in cyberspace in a way that's a little bit more rich than just comments. So I think the live calls are powerful and we want to grow these. So we're going to do 60 minutes today. We're going to start with sort of our vision for 2023 and what we're going to be working on as a community to sort of improve how much we're able to connect with each other. We're going to talk about Achilles tendinopathy or Achilles tendonitis, really Achilles issues in general, for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to do some Q&A. People that are live on the call will get priority. And then we have a couple community questions that we'll answer as well. So let's get into it. I think the first up is talking about our 2023 vision for the community. So, as the TFC community has grown over time, we've sort of fractured into different sub-communities and different projects, which weren't really interconnected in a really deep way. And so our main mission for 2023 is to integrate and harmonize the community, is to kind of bring everyone together and focus our energy and create ways where we can connect with each other, both digitally and in person on a more frequent basis. And so, the foundation for our community is going to be clear values, a shared story that we can all kind of bind together with, one single digital platform, and like I said, focusing on creating opportunities for people to connect. So I think everything starts with clear values, and until now we haven't really had a concrete value set. And so in December, we met with the Australian team, or I went and traveled and met with the Australian team, and we came up with 3 core values. The first one is truth. We value seeking truth through personal experience and open dialogue. Our second value is health. We value taking responsibility for our health and the health of the environment. And the third one is community, in that we value connecting and supporting our community by sharing our story and witnessing others. So those are really the 3 core values that are going to bind us together, and that hopefully we can all agree on. The second part of sort of harmonizing the community is creating a shared story that we can all kind of connect with and that resonates with us. And we're calling the story The Journey to Foot Freedom. So essentially what it really means is freeing ourselves from reliance on external things, right? We often orient around mitigating pain, and that can leave us reliant on things like drugs, external support, or professionals who we need in order to feel good. And really what the Journey to Foot Freedom is about is being free to explore without fear of pain and without relying on others to allow us to feel good. And one of the things we talk about is this quest to eliminate pain leads us into sort of this cave of comfort where we have to do more and more. We need more and more external things in order to keep us out of pain, and that keeps us further and further away from being able to explore freely. So that's really and there's going to be a lot more messaging about all this in the new year, but I figured it was good to mention. And one way we're going to try and simplify the journey for people that come to us and find TFC is with a map. We call it the Map to Foot Freedom, and it has 5 checkpoints. And these are really the 5 essential things that are simple, but tremendously powerful. This is sort of like everything we've learned since we started in 2015 really boils down to 5 really important things where if you understand them deeply, you really can take back full ownership of your experience and restore natural foot health by just going on your own journey and having the support of others. And those 5 keys are mindset, feet and footwear, balance, squat, and sitting. So we're going to have a ton more content about all this stuff, but just to mention it, I think is important. And in this story, making it to base camp means making a commitment to really spending half an hour a day for 6 weeks, moving through the checkpoints and building kind of a foundational understanding and foundational habits. And anyone who takes that journey to base camp is going to be able to be in sort of a subgroup within our new digital platform where you can speak to and exchange stories with other people who have made that commitment, right? And I think there's something special with knowing that, a group of X amount of people have made this journey and have gone through this 6 weeks and have committed to their foot health, being able to share stories with them and connect with them, I think there's a lot of power in that. So we're going to have pros in the network. So these are professionals who align with Foot Freedom and will work one-on-one with people in our community to resolve pain and injury. And really what we want to do is vet the professionals who are coming into our community to make sure that they align with our mindset, right? Where the primary tool is to empower people with education, not just to put them in orthotics or prescribed medication. And then lastly, we're going to have guides. And these right now are known as foot nerds. And they're people who have essentially done 12 weeks of experiential learning and are the ones who lead calls like this, in-person gatherings, which we're going to refocus on for 2023. And they lead by example, not because they have a certification. And built into that 12 weeks of training is actually showing your work to your peers, witnessing your peers. And so we're excited to roll that out sort of mid-year. So let's talk about Achilles tendinopathy or Achilles pain or issues in general. And I think I'll just give like a quick spiel for maybe 5 minutes, and then maybe we can open up the floor if anyone has anything to share about Achilles issues or any Achilles specific questions. So Achilles problems, like in calf injuries in general, let's say, they're not very fun. I actually had one mid 2022. I think it was mid 2021. I basically had a grade 2 strain of my calf. I did it playing tennis, so I can kind of relate firsthand to how debilitating it can be and how big of an obstacle it can be for people who can no longer do the activities they love, whether that's running or tennis or any kind of sport. And I think another reason Achilles issues are something that we wanted to cover today is it's a really common complaint from people who shift to natural footwear for running in particular. One of the biggest things is their calves are sore, their Achilles are on fire. And I think some people use that as some people gather from that natural footwear is just not for them, or they shouldn't run in natural footwear. But really what it really means is you've used your calves for the first time as shock absorbers when running, and it just takes a little bit of time for the body to adapt. So I wanted to open up a conversation about Achilles problems because I think it's something we hear a lot about. And if people can just understand Achilles issues a little bit better, they're going to be able to troubleshoot them a lot more effectively. So there's sort of two sides to Achilles, two common ways that the Achilles can get angry. There's tendonitis, which is just an angry tendon, painful, tender, more acute irritation. And then you have tendinopathy, which is more of a long-term overload issue that happens chronically and has sort of changes at the tissue level that happen. And tendinopathy really comes from the idea that the damage being done is outpacing the repair that can be done by the body. And so you're just overloading the tendon too much and it can't keep up with repairing itself over time. And I think the biggest question to ask ourselves if we do have Achilles issues is, why is the Achilles angry? Why is this area of my body sending pain signals to tell me something's up? And I think understanding that acute pain and inflammation is actually an adaptive, acute pain is an adaptive signal. The body's sending us that signal for a reason, so we have to make good use of it. And inflammation is actually an adaptive response by the body to heal an area. And so, I find we often demonize pain and inflammation. Long-term chronic inflammation is not good, but I think we have to understand that pain is a valuable signal that we have to listen to. And inflammation in the short term, like acute inflammation, is actually a really important response. It's how our bodies heal themselves. So if the tendon's angry, it's probably doing too much work, either acutely or chronically. And so I think, like I said, a good question to ask ourselves is, why is this tendon getting overwhelmed? What is this tendon doing that it shouldn't be doing? Or how am I pushing this tendon beyond its limits? And how can I find out how to recalibrate so that it has time to adapt and to sort of settle down? One last thing I wanted to say is that when I was practicing in clinic, one of my really big clinical observations were that there was always a correlation between sedentary living and Achilles issues, especially in the population of sedentary exercisers. So these are people who exercise 1 or 2 hours a day, could be running, could be going to the gym, but are sitting for 6 to 10 hours each day in a chair. And I noticed that almost everyone who was fit into this category of sedentary exerciser and had Achilles issues had hugely limited hip mobility. So their hips were tight, their balance was poor, and when you can't stabilize using your hip joint, and when you can't propel yourself forward by extending your hip and using your glutes, and if your feet are stiff because they're spending time in compressive shoes, all of those roles seem to start to be done by the calf, right? If you can't propel with your glutes, if you can't balance with your hip joint, then essentially your calf has to turn on as a stabilizer. Your calf has to engage as a primary propulsion muscle, and it's just not designed for that kind of load. And so eventually it seemed to just get angry. And oftentimes we go to soft tissue release as a solution, which can work temporarily to kind of relieve some of the tension. But what I found was that when people got into natural footwear, which allowed their foot to play a bigger role in stabilizing, their calf didn't have to lock up to stabilize. So that helped quite a bit. And when they started to restore some hip stability by working on their balance and restoring their hip extension by just simply getting out of the chair and spending more time on the ground, more time standing, more time varying their position, people often had really good outcomes and a lot of really good improvement if they just understood the underlying reason why the calf was getting painful, instead of just doing tissue work so that they could run, but then they would have to do it every time, or taking drugs to mask the pain. So hopefully that unpacks a little bit of context and nuance about Achilles issues. So maybe I'll open the floor if anyone has a story to share or a lesson to share, or really anything to share. Go for it.
Hi everyone. Thanks for this meeting as usual. I wanted to share that my experience was the other way around. I had been battling with Achilles tendinopathy for about a year and a half, maybe, because of all the running I do and stuff. I got like all the normal treatment, calf release and just stretch the calf, and it wouldn't go away. So I found out about Foot Collective, and I started like getting into this whole foot nerd stuff. And it was back in the day when you got like the 2-hour courses, and that's when I saw like the hip mobility thingy. And it actually got a lot better once I switched shoes and I started like working on my hip mobility. So it was like, in my mind, it was just the shoes, but now that I got a lot more knowledge about it, and I know like I switched my lifestyle and I'm like sitting on the floor and squatting every time I can and everything, now I can actually notice that it's not like just it, the shoes play a big role, but it's not just that. It's the fact that if my hip flexors get tight, I don't tend to have enough um like range of motion in my run, and my stride will actually get shorter, and that's when it may start to flare up. But as long as my hip flexors are like happy,
Mm-hmm.
it will not show up regardless of how many miles I will add up to that. So if anyone's like struggling with that and you're like really just focused on stretching the calves, I would suggest to start looking upwards, to remember it's connected and look upwards. And also something that really was a game changer for me is like, if my glutes are actually doing the job they're supposed to do, my calves have to do less work. So that's like something else I would suggest. And one great thing that doesn't feel like work and has done the trick for me is the balance beam. Because when you start putting your foot in different positions and exploring and going up and down, oh, the glutes really flare up. It's like, sometimes I didn't know that it could feel like that. And it makes a huge difference if I do just a couple of minutes before my run. So if you could give that a try, I think that's like a good point to start exploring. But above all, it's like that, like don't get focused just on one point, and explore your whole body and see what helps and what doesn't, and share it with us as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's so easy to look at things in isolation and be like, this is where the pain is, this is where I need to focus. And the minute you start to kind of branch out and try and kind of look upstream, I think that's the biggest thing people miss out on. And it's actually the biggest source of potential. I think that's kind of just doesn't get tapped into. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, those lessons and that perspective, Alex.
Nico, you had something to share with us?
Yeah, I was looking for some advice. I'm 32, and on my 32nd birthday, on the 9th December, I was told I was torn my Achilles. So I'm gonna see like another specialist today, but I've been like nervous to get the surgery, although I want to continue to play sports like basketball and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, with an acute Achilles injury, if there's like there, first of all, if you've torn your Achilles, it's really obvious. Like when I tore, mine wasn't a full tear when I injured my calf, but it was like a grade 2, so like pretty close. And it literally felt like someone took a hockey stick and smashed my leg, and I couldn't push off at all. And in those cases, it is good to go see a pro just to see what, what is the extent of tissue damage that is there, and what people do you have available to you in your local area that can help you sort of troubleshoot the acute phase of that. So probably an in-person assessment by a pro is the best path forward with that. And I think then it just becomes, like I worked at a center in Southern Ontario that did a lot of Achilles repair. There was a really well-known ankle specialist there. So we were like a hub for research of conservative treatment, where they don't actually do the surgery. They do it conservative, where they let the Achilles heal. They put your toes pointed in a boot, and it's a longer period of time. And then they compare that to people who get surgery done, where they actually sew up the Achilles. And when I left, it was actually looking like the results of the study that they had done to date were that people who did conservative treatment actually had better results within that cohort that we researched. And one of the big reasons I felt was that people had to take it way slower, right? When you go in and you get someone to sew that tendon up, it's really easy to get excited that you can do a lot of movement again. And they would sometimes have issues with people having delayed healing because they just did too much initially. So regardless of whatever outcome it is, if you get surgery or you don't, I think the big thing is getting in the mindset that your body is an amazing machine, amazing organism that heals itself and knows exactly how to organize itself to move efficiently. So then it just becomes the mindset of, well, if I expose my body to the right things, to a little bit of movement every day, to tissue loading within whatever constraints I'm given by the pros that I'm working with, and trust that the body knows what to do, and you're optimizing, eating good food, getting good sleep, all the other things, right? It's like this really holistic package of, in order to heal well, you have to have all the ingredients, and the ingredients include sleep, movement, like a good mindset, a community of people who you can speak to and connect with if you have issues. Like all of these things really tie into your ability to recover. And so just getting in the mindset that whatever happens, it's going to be good, and just embrace the process and essentially show up every day to work on your body to provide it the inputs it needs to heal so that you can come back and be better off than you were before you got injured. So that's probably my best non-answer. I don't know if anyone has anything to share with Nico.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Craig, did you want to share something? I see that you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I've been dealing with insertional Achilles issues for about 5 years now, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. Well, that can't be true, but I started in minimal footwear more than 15 years ago, and I ran, virtually daily in Vibram 5 fingers for more than 10 years. And then I ran a half marathon about 5 years ago. And when I finished the half marathon, I started having issues with my right Achilles, and it's definitely insertional. And I've tried all kind of things to get it corrected. I've been to, different foot doctors, and some wanted to do surgery and others wanted to boot me. So I'm still looking for an answer. I've tried different things. In fact, I've tried certain stretches that I've learned from the Foot Collective. I'm trying some things that I've learned from Eric Gordon in his book, Born to Run 2. But I've been in minimal footwear for more than 15 years, and some days are better than others. Just at the point where I think that I've got it licked, then it comes back again. And so I'm looking for a way to for a real answer for insertional Achilles issues.
Just before Nick answers, if I could just ask a question, a general question about your daily sitting habit, because that chair looks really comfy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I'm doing too much sitting. I'm a retired school teacher. I've been retired for about 1.5 years now. So my lifestyle has changed in the last year and a half. I coached cross country and track when I was a teacher, so I was active with my athletes year round, but that's changed in the last year and a half.
Craig, do you have any consistent balance training routine, or do you do anything to challenge your balance on a consistent basis right now?
Well, I've gotten lazy. I have for a while. I've got a beam. I went out and bought a 5-foot section of a 2-inch dowel rod, so I've got the ability to use a beam.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And even the beam is an advanced. The thing with the beam is it provides a challenging outlet for play. But I think people underestimate the power of simply doing barefoot balance work on a hard flat surface, or even a variable surface. And I think in particular, one thing one of the products we created is Health Kit. It's this 42-day sort of program. One thing we're doing to change it in 2023 is we're actually plugging in a daily practice, a very simple 10 to 15 minute routine that people can do every day. And if all they do is that, they're going to notice big changes. And what we realize is the results you can get from a 5 minute a day, so 2 minutes on one, 2.5 minutes on one side, 2.5 minutes on the other, balance training session can be remarkable. And even, one of the effects it has is, I think, you said you sit too much. I think everyone sits too much. And what I've found is that spending a bit of time training your balance barefoot can offset so much of our sitting time, because it simply plugs back in the deep muscles in our hip. Sort of like our shoulders have a rotator cuff of muscles that keep the ball centered in the joint. Our hips have that too. Like hips and shoulders are not functionally and physiologically that different. And when those unplug, it leaves a big gap to be filled by something. And from my experience, the calf almost always fills that, right? If it can't get the stability, like it sounds to me like you spend a lot of time in natural footwear, your foot stability is probably better than the majority of people, because your feet aren't confined and stiff, right? If you're spending time in natural footwear. So if we look upstream at the hip, and this idea that literally 5 minutes a day, and an experiment I recommend is, without changing the load, like I think knowing what threshold you hit where you start to get a flare up, like how many kilometers you do or what kind of training volume you have to do until it really like activates, and knowing what that amount is, and doing like a 30-day experiment where 5 minutes a day for 30 days, do balance training. Do it on both sides, on your left and your right. Take a note of which side is harder or which side you feel is more of a challenge, just to see if there's an asymmetry there. And see if that gets your hip back in the game just to the point where you're, because it's not about unloading the calf completely, right? Like you don't have to completely transform your body. You just have to get the other areas involved just enough that your calf doesn't hit that threshold of getting angry and sending you signals. But I think, in your situation, a daily balance training section, even 5 minutes, I would try that and just see what that does, because that might do the trick. And if it doesn't, then that there's, you can check that box off and say, okay, where do I go next? But I think that would be my first recommendation, is just see how that is. And that can start with just like standing on one leg, barefoot, eyes closed. It can be, we're putting clocks into the basic daily practice in the new version of Health Kit, which is literally you stand on one leg and you take your other foot and touch faces of the clock. So you go 12, 1, all the way around. And really just seeing, like, is it way more challenging on one side than the other? And if you are able to do that consistently, does that affect how frequently or how intensely the Achilles issue comes up? So that'd be a good suggestion.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
And I just wanted to say one last thing about how I can attest to like the blind spot of like, even when we eliminate some of like the comforts of the cave, whether it's a super comfy couch or a chair or something, like there is just a lot of sitting, right? Like I've eliminated most of the furniture in our space, and I still think I'm confused about why my joints are in pain when I calculate in a day. And it's like, well, I have been sitting on the floor with my hips in flexion for 4 hours or 5 hours working at the computer, and I haven't done anything opposite that. So it's like, and that foam roller or the soft tissue release where I mean, we just naturally go to the most efficient, easiest thing that might not be the long-term solution. So like, I love playing tennis too. And I know that if I roll out my calves, like if I haven't done the little things, even a half an hour of the things that will make me feel better long-term, I know that I can get to that foam roller and roll out the calves really good. And then I can go run around on the court for a couple of hours, but I usually pay for it. And those are like the little blind spots that I really want to encourage people to look at. Like, go back to the very basic, like how much am I truly doing something different with my hips, and how much am I leaning on those like very basic tendencies to do the easiest thing for the most immediate solution.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing too is with key number 5 on the 5 keys on the map that we're creating is sitting. And really the standard that we're trying to the standard that we're putting out there as an aspiration for people to work towards is limiting your daily chair sitting to 4 hours or less per day. And if you are sitting in a chair, get up and move every 30 minutes. And that can literally be just like stand up, walk for 10 seconds, and then sitting back down. Because it's not actually like, the goal is not to eliminate all sitting. The goal is simply to adopt different ways of sitting. So if you're sitting in a chair for 4 hours, but you need to sit for 2-3 other hours, sit on the floor for the other time, sit on a hard surface where you have to move. So I think the goal is just progress, right? It's not transformation. Transformation is really hard. And we don't do very well at succeeding at that. But if the goal is, I think a sitting audit is a really good place to start. Like, how much sitting in a chair do I actually do each day? And I used to do this with patients in clinic, and they would shock themselves with how much more sitting they do in a day than they actually think. And so starting point is just like, what is the number I get on average each day if I calculate how much sitting I'm doing? No judgment on what that number is. That's a really important point, right? It's not good or bad. It's just your starting point. And then how can I chip away 30 minutes a day by sitting in a different position? Like the first 30 minutes of, 2 hours of Netflix at the end of the day, spend it on the floor and see how that feels. And then kind of check that box off and say, I sat for 30 minutes less today. And like I said, plugging in a 5-minute daily balance routine, if you can actually be consistent with it and put a prompt to remind yourself to do it, seems to just offset so much of the imbalance we create with sitting, because it's almost like this self-correcting recalibration time that your body just is so good at finding out how to efficiently stop you from falling over if you're actually training it consistently. So yeah, I think 4 hours or less a day, move every 30 minutes, strive towards less time in a chair, not no time in a chair. I think all those things together can give you a good start to like experimenting to how you can get rid of this issue. So,
okay.
Melody?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So my question is, I've been dealing with Achilles tendinopathy for like 3 years, and I feel like I do the right things, but I guess my question is, at what point do you think it's still an active injury or an active problem, or has it like healed incorrectly and that's just how it will be? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if there is pain, there's still a signal from your body saying something still needs to be changed. I think that's a good starting point. So if you just look at pain, like no judgment, it's like pain is a signal that my body is saying you still have a little bit of work to do, or you still need to recalibrate something because this tissue is still not happy. I think another thing to take note is like tendinopathy is a longer term thing, and there are tissue changes, but our tissues are constantly changing, right? All the time. And, I think it's something like every 7 years, every cell in our body essentially dies and is replaced by a new cell. So our tissues turn over. And so really the focus, and I think what I encourage everyone to focus on, because it gives you agency, is like, what are you exposing your body to? And are you exposing it to the things that will help your body adapt in the direction you want it to? So, if the tissue is still angry, even writing down, like, what am I doing to work on it? And what am I doing to load this tissue? And what things do I do in my life that could potentially be causing this problem to continue, whether that's sitting or wearing shoes that compress your foot. Anything that affects the hip and the foot negatively will usually show up actually at the knee, the Achilles, or the calf. That has been my experience. So looking at the feet, the 5 keys, feet and footwear is all about Are you wearing natural footwear that allows your foot to splay naturally and give you a good foundation to stabilize your body? Because if you're not, the body's going to get the stability from somewhere else. And if it's taking it from your calf, then your Achilles will just get angry because it's just put on tension too frequently. So looking at the foot, looking at the hip, taking a diary of how frequently are you getting, because a lot of times it's actually about the trend, not necessarily the injury itself. Like if I'm getting pain less frequently or the pain is less intense, then I'm moving in the right direction, right? It's really important to know, because the frustrating thing is like it comes on sometimes, it goes away sometimes. I don't know if it's getting better. I don't know if it's getting worse. I don't know if what I'm doing is helping. Like those are kind of like the frustrating questions we ask if we don't have any way of knowing, like, what am I doing? What am I doing to improve this? What am I doing to potentially make it worse? And once I know those two things, I can then play with the variables by subtracting or adding things. And if I'm keeping track of how irritated it is, then I can see, okay, I'm feeling better and this is what I changed. Therefore, maybe I should do a bit more of that. I'll keep doing more of that until it stops improving. So it's like, if it's not getting better, try something different. If it is getting better, keep doing what you're doing until it stops working. That sounds super simple, but I think if we trim away a lot of the noise, that's really what it boils down to. So I don't know if that was helpful or not.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alex, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say what Nick said at the end, that pay extra attention to what's actually helping. If you feel it's getting a little bit better, pay attention to what you did and what you didn't, because it's once it's like tendinopathy, it might come back with some if you load it a lot or not. So pay extra attention to what you're doing that's working, and patience. You need to have like a lot of patience and listen to your body to notice what's like actually helping you get the full mobility of it. And also, it's not just like how mobile are you as a whole also plays a lot into anything that's limiting your range of motion in other areas. So maybe if you just what has helped me a lot in my own experience is like not focusing just on one area, but focusing on my whole body to be able to move properly, and that starts releasing everything. Because if your hip moves adequately, your upper body moves adequately, and so forth. And also, I wanted to say to Craig that I wanted to ask how deep is his squat, because when my calves are tight or not, or my hips are not in proper motion, I can't squat as properly as I normally do. And that's like my starting point. If I'm not squatting like freely, I need to do something to release my hips. So maybe like that's also like has worked for me. If my squat isn't as freely as it usually is, then there's something like tight, or I have been sitting too much in chairs and stuff.
Yeah, I think the balance, like our key for balance is, can you stand on one foot, eyes closed, barefoot for 60 seconds without falling? And then the squat key is, can you get into a deep resting squat? I think those two things, just as a check-in, like if you're, before you go on a run or before you do activity, if all you do is check in on those two things, it can kind of tell you where you're at, right? If your balance is great, it's feeling good, you're feeling stable, and your squat feels nice, maybe there's not a whole lot of prep you need to do before you run. But if you just, like, I know if I test those two things after like a 6-hour car ride or plane ride, it tells me right away that I need to send them a little bit of love and work on things. And it doesn't have to be long. Like maybe it's a 3-4 minute routine, that's it. But I think using them as a check-in, as just like a litmus test, can go a long way. And at the start, you might not know really what you're looking for or what you're feeling, if it's good or bad. But the more frequently you do it, the more you tune in. Oh, this is what being stiff feels like, and this is what feeling really integrated feels like. So, yeah.
Nick Holt.
Yeah, sure. I think this might be relevant for both Craig and Melody, because I mean, I recently finished the health kit program, and I think the most powerful element was just like the detailed level of tracking. And I was able to notice certain things that I wouldn't have normally noticed if I wasn't tracking on the level of detail. And I think something like ankles or even big toe mobility stuff like this might not be perceivable, but when I was taking a really like detailed level of detailed notes with it, I was able to see the progress, and then that kind of motivated me to keep going on the things that I was doing. I think in the past I've just sort of done stuff haphazardly and haven't like measured that. And so I think that was really powerful to just get that level of detail. That's really, that was huge for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, you got it.
Anyone else
Maybe
have
let-
anything about
Well,
Achilles?
maybe one last thing I would like to offer is just the idea of the continuum, right? That personally, I'm always waiting for whatever the injury or pain is to go away forever and never come back. And usually what happens, like, especially with Achilles, is that as soon as it feels better, I do a little more and I challenge myself a little bit more than I normally would. And then I have to go back and adjust. But the one thing I realized is over the long haul, I might have some little seeming setbacks, but the progress is really over long term, and I'm doing more with my body. So when the pain comes, I think, oh, it's all for naught. But now I'm playing 2 and 3 hours of tennis or 3 or 4 times a weekend. Whereas 2 years ago, when I first started working on it, I could barely go up and down the stairs without feeling some level of pain. So I think paying attention to like long-term mindset is really helpful too, that you might be making way more progress than you think you are because you might be challenging yourself more when you start to feel better. Does that make sense?
That's such a good point. And I think key number one, and the reason it's key number one is mindset, is just people often, we all want to do the activities we love tomorrow. And I think like Ruth says, the minute we start to feel good, sometimes we start to do more without really realizing that we're loading our bodies more. And when the pain comes back, we feel like we haven't made any progress. So I think that's such a good point. And, key number one is long-term mindset. It's not a race. The goal is progress, and progress is simply showing up every day and putting some energy into the process, whether it's even just thinking of like, what did I do today to improve my hips? What did I do today to improve my balance? And if I haven't done anything, if I do a minute worth of stuff, I've shown up today and I've done today's work so that I can keep moving forward. And I would often see that in clinic too. People would just get frustrated that they weren't perfect. And that got in the way of them actually doing a little bit each day because they just will get flustered and frustrated. But I think once we adopt a long-term mindset where it's like, I'm not just working on changing my body so I can get out of pain. I'm working on changing my lifestyle and what I do with my body so that I can do things I love forever. And that's like fundamentally a different game than just simply get out of pain so I can do the things I want to do. So yeah, that's a good point, Ruth.
Nick, I just wanted to say, I don't know if you all can see the chat, but Craig asked, can deep squats be done with elevated heels? What are your thoughts about that?
I think the aspiration is to work towards being able to do a deep squat with heels on the floor. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with doing it. Like, with the squat key, it's really just like getting to a squat every day. And what that squat actually looks like doesn't really matter right away, right? I think the goal is to put yourself as close to the line of being able to do it as possible. So, for example, if you lift your heels by an inch, you can squat easily. If you don't lift your heels at all, you can't squat. What if you went to half an inch? Would you be like just on the threshold of being able to do it? And could you work towards that and just slowly reduce the heel lift? So sometimes it actually can be helpful to put something under your heels so that you can track like how much of a lift do I need to be able to get into the squat? And whatever you need, if it means putting like a 2-inch heel lift under your heels so that you can get into a resting squat and just kind of, move around there and spend time there, that's still exposing to your hip joints to a good amount of rotation and getting you into that position. Like, can you take a couple deep breaths and get into that position without any pain? And if so, for how long, right? If it's 10 seconds today and in 2 weeks it's 30 seconds or a minute, that's an improvement. So I think you just got to play with it and play with the variables, whether that means lifting your heels, holding on to a railing, holding on to a counterbalance. It doesn't really matter. I think the aspiration is to get towards a resting squat, heels on the floor with feet hip width apart and straight. But it's not, if you can't do that, your squat's terrible. It's work towards that. If you're working towards that every day, that's the goal. Whether you make it there or not actually doesn't matter. It's just like, are you exposing your body to inputs that are moving you closer to there?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So Michelle put in the chat, not sure if it would help with the Achilles, but doing weighted calf raises with straight and bent knee have been a game changer. Yeah, I mean, strengthening is, typically with loading is always something where you have to be really fine tune it of like, because typically people will go to load too early and they'll aggravate things. But I think there is something to be said about gradually loading tissues to build capacity. You just have to do it within the context that you're not overloading it. So I think, one of the biggest things we want to get across with Health Kit is helping people listen to their bodies, right? Is making it so that instead of always having to ask someone whether you're doing too much or too little, how do we get better at listening to our bodies so that we can feel free to sort of like try things and be able to know how to troubleshoot whether we're doing too much or too little ourselves by just listening to our bodies and knowing that there's going to be times where we're going to do too much. I think that's just literally part of the process. Obviously, you don't want to do it to the point where you hit catastrophe and you get a big injury. But I think the more we tune into listening to our bodies, the more we empower ourselves to be able to troubleshoot so that we don't have to rely on other people. So, yeah, I mean, and you mentioned, sorry, go for it, whoever's talking. That's all good.
Yeah. Just on while we're on the strength component, have you noticed like a general framework between like calf raises and anterior tibialis work to be like the most helpful? Because I know a lot of people aren't doing, essentially dorsiflexion stuff. Have you noticed like what has more impact? I mean, I know it's going to be individual, but how do you look at that sort of equation from the front and the back of the joint?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really done much with that. I don't have much experience with that. Anyone else have experience with that?
When my Achilles gets like very stiff or whatever, if I work more on my tibialis, it starts like to release because I get like the whole foot movement again. So yeah, it's like work with both, like don't neglect like the front muscle as well. But I found it like instead of just stretching the calves, if I stretch actually the tibialis, it helps me regain like full mobility of my foot.
Do you do strengthening stuff for your anterior
Yeah.
tibialis? Yeah.
I think one thing I used to always notice in runners that wore really padded shoes was that tib ant was almost always super tight. And when you look at natural running, we're landing on our forefoot, absorbing the shock with our calf and our Achilles. Highly cushioned footwear allows you to heel strike, and then you have to actually eccentrically slow the foot down as it comes down to the ground, which means your tibialis anterior is being used to slowly lower your foot. And so that muscle is basically doing eccentrics with every step, which it's not designed for. And the front compartment, like tib ant, the area where people commonly get medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints, would just be super tight. So the kneeling stretch with toes pointed, I found really powerful to kind of open up that anterior shin area. And tissue work into tib ant was just always a really big eye opener for people, for them to be able to see how overloaded their tibialis anterior was from being used in running with the heel strike. So yeah, good question, Nick. So we do have two questions from, if at any point anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to do it in the chat or to just raise your hand. But we have two questions from the community. And I think one of them is a good opportunity to just sort of contextualize that we can't, well, how about this? I'll just read what the person submitted, and then can kind of give a few thoughts and then invite anyone else to share if they have them. So the person wrote, I was in an incident that caused a compound fracture in my left foot, causing my metatarsal to pop up, broke every bone in my foot except for the big toe, had to get 3 pins, 18 screws, a plate, and a skin grafting and a bone graft. So I think first off there is like, this is a very unique case. This is not the common. So it's very hard for us to give specific answers, but I'll read the second part. So now a year later, I can barely wiggle my toes. By good grace, I'm able to walk, but I'm having major complications. Being from the impact of the incident, a lot of my tissues were stripped and ripped from my bones, and I have no fat padding, causing me to walk on my bones under my toes. Would you guys be able to help me find an alternative or a more comfortable way for this? I've tried orthopedic shoes, specifically made by a clinical doctor that I was referred to by my orthopedic doctor. So super unique case, which means we can't give any specific answers, but I think there's probably some helpful principles there. So I always like to anchor back to the fact that if we know that the body adapts and heals over time, and that how it adapts is based on the inputs we provide it, then really it just boils down to, number one, what do you want to get back to doing? What are the ingredients needed to do that thing, right? So what are your goals? What capacity is needed to get back to doing those goals? And when you have a really clear motivation, I think it really helps fuel your progress. And then basically with those questions answered of what you want to get back to doing, rewind and say, what's the smallest step of what I can do today to work towards getting there? And so I think my biggest advice would be, know that your body adapts to what you expose it to, which you have full control over. Know that you have to take a long-term mindset, and that little things done consistently every day will result in massive changes. And when you're dealing with something so multifactorial and complex like this, I think just like Nick said, the value of taking detailed notes every day and recording how you feel, what you did, what it changed, and just trusting that your body is going to do exactly what it needs to do if you provide it all the resources for healing. Once again, that includes movement, but also the sleep you get, the food you eat, the people in the community around you, and your mindset. I think mindset's the biggest one. It's really easy to get down and frustrated, but just keeping a positive mindset and putting your motivation on just showing up every day to do something and writing down what you've done. That's really the essence of why we created Health Kit, is help people hold themselves accountable to doing a little bit of stuff every day for a period of 6 weeks, to taking notes and to building some really simple habits to just like do a daily practice every day for 15 minutes, and you're going to have transformative changes if you're able to actually show up and do it every day. The hard thing is not what you do, it's to actually do it every day. So does anyone have any input for that person or anything to add on that?
I mean, I think long-term mindset is, I think we don't even really give that nearly as much. We know it intellectually. It's like, yeah, we know we need to take a long-term mindset, but boy, oh boy, I think that that's one of the keys that is something that's so important to come back to regularly and often, is that we're so used to everything being like at our beck and call immediately, you know, including like whatever the fixes are. We just live in a place, in a time where like everything can be fixed very quickly, no matter what, you know? And so our bodies really do take, you know, so there's a gap between like how normal things get fixed really fast and how our bodies need extra time. Like we're these sort of primitive creatures in a certain way that take time. And the world and everything around us gets fixed a lot faster than we give credit for. Our bodies like need a little extra processing time. And that is longer than I think we even give it credit for when we think about taking a long-term mindset, from my experience.
I agree. Patience is one of the most important things when working to resolve an issue. And I think another thing I find is the tendency for people to really not focus on resolving an issue until it is so bad that they have no choice but to. And I think just having the mindset that every single time you feel pain, you know, pain always, I used to always tell people, pain starts as a whisper. And if you ignore it for long enough, it starts to yell at you. And if you can just listen to the whisper, you often never get to the point where it's yelling at you and stopping you from doing your stuff. And it's easy to say that. I mean, I myself don't even take that advice sometimes. But I think just knowing, having an awareness that that's a thing and that our bodies are often really good at speaking to us and letting us know something's not right way ahead of the time that it stops us from doing anything. You know, every time I listen to my body earlier, I remember, you know, it's more vivid to remember that in future. And so if you're always doing that and you're not just adding supplements to your exercises as a way to like just patch up these little issues, but you're actually figuring out, well, it turns out this thing, like working on my balance, is beneficial. How do I plug that into part of my life so that I don't necessarily, like if every time I make a coffee, I do 20 squats, I like drinking coffee every morning. So I automatically do squats every morning if I pair them. So the idea is reduce the amount of things you have to remember and add into your day and plug good inputs into your day so that they're just part of your day instead of extra things. I think that's how the long-term mindset and just showing up every day really gets hard coded into our days. And I think that's been really powerful for me.
And one last thing I wanted to add on to what I was talking about, the body, is that like there is an emotional component to all this, in the sense that like, I don't know about anybody else, but when I'm in pain and I'm trying to fix something, I sometimes forget just to stop and pause and acknowledge that I'm really sad because my body hurts and I can't do the things I want to do. And, you know, and that like actually acknowledging the setback in an emotional way is so much more important. And we don't stop really as humans to want to be productive or to want to play or to want to move forward in our lives. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's, acknowledge that our bodies change and they're in pain, and we don't want to necessarily feel that, and then pausing to allow for that is has done me a world of good. Like grief, that you have a really, I mean, that last incident that or that last question that Nick read to us from the community sounds devastating to somebody, all that tissue damage, and that it takes an emotional toll. And I don't think we really talk about that aspect enough. Yeah. Or acknowledge it in our personal lives. We don't have to air it out, but like just acknowledging the grief that comes with even a minor injury that sets you back from walking quickly to the grocery store and back to your car or something, and not feeling like you can be the whole healthy, movable flesh suit that you like to be.
I think there's something to be said too, where I remember when I had my calf injury, I first started treating it as a problem to be solved, which was fine at the start, but then it was way too much work. It was like way too work oriented. So I wasn't as motivated to show up. And when I started to really like lighten it a little bit and treat it as a game to play, it's like, ooh, I wonder what I can do today that's different than I did yesterday. I think having a playful mindset and having other people that you can bounce things off of and share about what you're doing, or rope other people into doing experiments with you, I think that's a really powerful element of, like, it's a really cool way to show that community can actually play a huge role in us working to resolve issues by finding other people who are, and this is really the essence of what we're trying to do this upcoming year, is create a community platform in cyberspace that's just one hub that everyone comes into, that creates way more opportunities for people to connect with each other. For two people with Achilles issues to be able to connect with each other and be able to speak to each other and share what they're doing and share their experiments and share their challenges and be like, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. Has anyone else had issues with this part of recovery? And having another person from anywhere in the world come up and say, yeah, I had that and this is what I did and it really helped. So I think treating it as a game to play and taking a playful mindset to it, and also connecting with other people who have similar issues and seeing what they're doing, and essentially creating packs where it's like, all right, let's do 5 minutes of balance work for the next 10 days, and then let's connect again in 10 days and see how we did, or send each other videos or something like that. So I think there's a really powerful community element in like that community message that we read. It's like, it's really easy to feel alone and isolated, and that you're on this all on your own. And that can be frustrating and make you feel really lonely sometimes. But when you realize there's a ton of other people out there that have foot issues of varying types and are all working on resolving them by just showing up every day and doing a little bit, that can be a really potent way to kind of fuel the motivation and give you a little more support. So that's really what we're trying to harness in 2023 with a sort of a new and improved community platform. So, Craig, are you doing squats right now?
No, but I'm doing a little balance work.
Nice. There you go.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's, just sneak it in during the day. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. No time like the present.
So I think that's probably a time to start wrapping up. So we still got 7 more minutes. If anyone has a question or wants to share a story, it can be a story about a recent injury, a story about something they're working on that has helped, anything really. And then when we have 2 minutes left, I'll do kind of a wrap up and let people know sort of where we go from here, because we're going to do a call on January 14th to update everyone about progress we're making. We're looking to launch the new community platform on February 1st. On January 1st, we should have a new landing page at thefootcollective.com, which is going to be way simpler and give people an idea of sort of what's coming. Like right now, everything's very fractured. There's like too many things, too many platforms. We want to bring everything into one. Starts with a cleaner landing page. So should be live January 1st. But yeah, if anyone has questions or anything to share, go for it.
Well, maybe I could just tell people who love tennis as much as Nick Holt and Nick St. Louis and I do, that we are launching a digital product, much like the health kit, specifically for tennis players in April. So if you have any questions questions, or you want to check out our 2 episodes podcasts on YouTube about specifically what we're doing with tennis players, that is exciting news.
Nice. And who is that
We're
going to
up.
be for, Ruth? Like who would be interested in TFC tennis?
Anybody who loves to pick up a racket and hit any kind of ball over the net or anywhere. Racquetball, any racket sports players. I mean, anybody from recreational tennis players to elite level tennis players is what we're hoping to address in 2023. And all aspects, starting from the ground up, because I don't know if Nick has anything to say, but we both love tennis, and we have tennis communities in separate parts of the world, and all the same issues that we see across the community, we see in tennis players, and we want to keep our tennis communities healthy so we can play together for a long time, because community is really important to us at TFC and as humans. And so we want to try to see if we can help out there.
Amazing. Yeah, I think community is like a word that gets thrown around a lot and said a lot. And, you know, in trying to figure out like, how do we facilitate and enrich our community? Like if we're going to create a new community center in cyberspace, what would a really good community center look like, right? And so does anyone want to share how, you know, if someone said, what is community? Does anyone have any thoughts or want to share what community means to them? I would love to hear it if anyone's open to share. If not, that's all good. But what does community mean?
Oh, tell us, please.
Well, I try and share. I moved to Nelson last year, new area for myself, new job, new people. And I was lucky to have a couple of roommates I was able to explore and get to meet. And I started doing dance lessons and joined a big community in there. And just after COVID, I saw how it started growing. More people got interested, more people were able to go to lessons again and take classes. And now we had 2 weeks ago, our last social night just before the New Year's and the Christmas holidays. So yeah, we started getting to know each other. We started joining new people, and on the social nights you have a lot of new people. So you always go up to them and just kind of get them to dance with you. And then you start connecting with those, and then you start noticing that those people have the same interest in you. They're the same outdoorsy, kind of goes skiing and snowboarding with them now. And with me having started the 12-week course in November and coming towards running my own workshop, my first approach was my dance community to put my idea out there to potentially share my experience and share my knowledge I gained over the last few months. And yeah, I'm excited to share my journey, because hips, knees, and ankles are a lot involved in like dancing and moving around. So yeah, that's I guess my kind of view of my new community I gained here.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Flo.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think it takes courage to put ourselves out there and be willing to engage with community. I think that's one thing where it's like very easily to almost isolate ourselves sometimes. And it takes courage to put ourselves out there and actually put energy into building new connections. And yeah, it's really just about what opportunities are available. And we want to create more opportunities in the digital world, but also use the digital to facilitate in person, because you can't beat in-person connection of like seeing people in person, dancing with them, doing a shared activity or having a shared experience. And yeah, I just think to me, community is connecting with others, and connecting with others, I think really boils down to sharing our experience, taking part in a shared experience, or witnessing other people's experience. And I think that's, you know, like that's to me the essence of community. It's can sometimes be this abstract term to talk about, but yeah, who was saying something a second ago? Go ahead if you want.
Might have just been.
I just want to add that, for example, my part in the journey, sometimes we do not know how to explore, and Alex Chikorita in my journey was like a very huge change. and also the community, because he just helped me to explore, and sometimes it was like just a funny time making more exercises or more stretches. And I think that the community, and for example the help of Alex, it was the best part of my journey.
Amazing. It's way funner when we do it with others. It just is.
Yeah.
I felt
Perfect.
like I talked too much already, but I just wanted to add my perspective of community.
Please do.
I tend to be more of a solo type of person because of my autism spectrum thingy. But for me, community has always been about how can we help others feel better or feel like they belong. So saying that if I can help any other foot nerd and to explore, or if you're stuck with something and my insight or my questions are just me taking accountability of what you're doing is going to help, by all means reach out. It's like, I think for me that's what part of being a foot nerd is not that just that we're done exploring with how we work, but also helping others get like to fall in love with this movement. So yeah.
Alex, I don't think you talk too much. I think I would welcome you to talk more, because everything you're saying resonates a lot. And thank you for sharing, and thank you, Fernanda, for sharing that as well. So it's 2:30. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you all for sharing and contributing. I think this was, our biggest call, and I think it was the most engagement. So I think
Yeah.
really just connecting with each other, sharing stories. We'll always have, I think we'll probably follow the flow of update people on what we're working on at TFC, so everyone can feel like they sort of know where we're going, have a focal topic to discuss, and then just leave the floor open for Q&A. So I think that format will probably be one we stick with for a while. We're going to call these live calls monthly fireside conversations, and we invite any foot nerd or anyone from the community to participate in these, and we're excited for them to grow and for richer conversations to keep brewing. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you all a wonderful start to the new year. Thank you, Ruth, for coordinating this. She's like the quarterback behind the scenes that does all the work to put these together. So thank you, Ruth. Thank you, all the foot nerds. And wishing you all a great start to the new year. And we'll see you in January. We're going to do a January 14th hangout to update everyone about the lead up to February 1st, where we launched the new community. And then the same page that you found the Zoom link for this one, we'll have all our calls there until there's a new place for the links, and we'll make sure to put the link there so that people know where to continue on with that. So thanks, everyone. Love you all.
Yep.
Ciao for now.
And don't underestimate your place in the community. Don't underestimate it. Happy New Year.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.